And I, for one, am very interested to hear what you have to say and see then if you can convince me to actually put my money behind you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. Yes, my name is Belinda Di Bartolo. A little bit of background about me. I have about 20 years experience in academic research and recently joined LCT in January this year to drive forward this exciting groundbreaking research in NT cell. So that's what I'm going to take you through today. So disclaimer. So Living Cell Technologies is an Australasian biotechnology company whose mission is to discover, develop and commercialize novel treatments for debilitating conditions. And we do this by leveraging the potential of living cells and using these living cells to address the unmet need in these serious conditions. And so as a company, we've previously worked in the diabetes field and developed a product called DiabeCell. And this was acquired and is now being further developed by Otsuka Pharmaceutical Factory in the US. And so we are now focused in the area of Parkinson's disease. And I'm going to tell you today about NT cell. So this is our corporate snapshot. We have a market cap of 10 million. We have about as of the 31st of March, we had 3.5 million in cash. We recently raised 1.2 million and in a share purchase placement. And so that brings our cash total to 4.9 million. And LCT benefits from a really experienced leadership on the board. So we have two well-respected in their fields research academics in our executive chairman and interim CEO, Professor Bernie Tuck, and in our non-executive medical director, Professor Carolyn Su, who is a well-renowned expert in Parkinson's disease and movement disorders. And they're joined by Mr. Robert Wilcox, who is a very experienced businessman, particularly with publicly listed companies. And also Dr. Andrew Kelly, who has extensive experience in research and development and commercialization. Our company secretary is Mertens, led by Mark Licciardo, and our management team consists of myself as COO and Mr. Daya Uka, who is our Chief Financial Officer, who is based in New Zealand. So Parkinson's disease is the second most common neurodegenerative disorder. And it comes from a degeneration of the brain cells that produce dopamine. And so dopamine is an important chemical in the brain because it controls our smooth muscle movement. So we've all been exposed to Parkinson's disease signs and symptoms, as Chrissy said, being able to, catch a ball after the tremors, have started. Stiffness in movement, inability to control speech, and it can even lead to a decline in brain function. And what's really fascinating is that the current treatments that are available for Parkinson's disease only treat the signs and the symptoms that we see. So the tremors can stop, the replacement with all the drugs are really dopamine replacements. So this can control your movement and improve it, but ultimately there is no treatment available that actually prevents the progression of Parkinson's disease. And so when a patient presents to the clinic for the first time to be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, 50% of the brain cells that produce dopamine have already degenerated. And so we need to protect the remaining 50%. Because if we don't protect those cells, the disease will still continue to progress. And as the disease progresses, the treatments that we are giving these patients, like levodopa, the dopamine replacement therapies, will cease to be effective. Because as the disease progresses, the treatments are less effective. And so this opens up a gap in the market in which LCT can progress forward its NT cell program. And it's a growing global market. It's currently worth $5.7 billion US dollars, and it's only expected to rise with a prediction that it will be worth 11.5 billion by 2029. And why is it rising? Well, it's rising because we have an ever-increasing aging population. As we live longer, we are more exposed to age-related diseases. There are currently 10 million people with Parkinson's disease globally, 100,000 in Australia alone, and it costs the Australian economy $775 million per year. So what is NT cell? NT cell is choroid plexus cells that are surgically removed from the brain. Now, choroid plexus cells exist to secrete essential growth factors and nutrients in the brain. They will be implanted, so they will be surgically removed from a special herd of designated pathogen-free pigs that live on the sub-Antarctic Auckland Islands. Now, these special pigs, very clean pigs, will provide the choroid plexus tissue. The tissue will be surgically removed, shipped to Australia, in which it will become encapsulated. And this is important because the encapsulation process enables a protection of these living cells. It's a microcapsule that allows free movement of the growth factors and nutrients from the cells out into the surrounding environment when it's implanted into the brain. Importantly, however, it also protects these cells from being attacked by the patient's immune system. So we're looking to get regulatory approval from the TGA in order to implant 50 plus Parkinson's disease patients with NT cell. And this is on the basis of previous clinical trials that were done in New Zealand. So a phase 1 clinical trial was performed in 2012, in which we demonstrated safety and toxicity data. And then phase 2 also extended on the phase 2 on the safety and toxicity data, but also demonstrated most effective dosage. So in this phase 2 trial, LCT implanted 40 capsules, 80 capsules, and 120 capsules on either side of the brain. It was the 80 capsule dosage that demonstrated the most effective clinical endpoint with the greatest change in UPDRS score from baseline. So the UPDRS score is the most common measure for Parkinson's disease patients, and it really measures change in the symptoms and the signs. So despite this clinically relevant effect that was observed, the study failed to reach clinical statistical significance because we had quite small numbers in each group. So despite this, it was this indication to LCT to establish a third phase 2 clinical trial to occur here in Australia so that we could capitalize on an increased patient population. So what's LCT doing at the moment for this project? We've successfully secured use of the pigs with an agreement with NZENO in New Zealand. And NZENO will provide the choroid plexus tissue out of their facility that they're establishing in Invercargill. So NZENO is managed as a designated pathogen-free facility. And this is done by screening by an American molecular diagnostics company called Zoologics. They are currently upgrading the facility to house our clinical herd of pigs and also establish our surgical suites. And it's here that the choroid plexus tissue will be removed before it is then shipped to Australia. And in Australia, we are perfecting the manufacturing process. So NT cell will be prepared in a non-GMP facility. And so we heard GMP before, so good manufacturing process. We're doing it outside of a good manufacturing process first to establish to the TGA that we can reproduce the NT cell, just like we did in New Zealand for the previous clinical trials. And then once we've done that, which we're currently doing at the moment, we'll be ready to move into a GMP facility and manufacture the NT cell to be given to patients. In addition to this, we have recently signed an agreement with a Sydney-based startup company called OptiCell AI. And here we're going to be using digitally enhanced artificial intelligence methods in order to consistently optimize the capsule selection and the maintenance of the NT cell. So we're looking for regulatory approval. We've had preliminary discussions with the TGA for the approval for NT cell to be implanted into Parkinson's disease patients. And we've done this because we are likely to be the first Australian company that will do a xenocell transplantation with living cells. And approval for this has already occurred in New Zealand with MedSafe, and this was done in 2012 and 2015. And so between MedSafe and TGA, we've been able to start preliminary discussions for that approval. And then we will begin our clinical trial. So the aim here is to modulate disease progression. As I said earlier, our phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials demonstrated safety and identified the most effective dose. The planned site for this clinical trial is in Sydney, where we will have access to a state-of-the-art PET scanner, which is currently being installed. Now, access to this PET scanner is a huge advantage because it will give us a level of sophistication in measuring these, the dopamine levels in these patients that just was not available to us in the past. And it gives us a level of quantitation. UPDRS scores are very commonly used to measure effective treatments in Parkinson's disease patients, but they are subjective. And so being able to provide a level of sophistication, as I said, in a proper quantitative manner will be very important. We are lucky enough to have Professor Carolyn Sue on our board, who is an international authority in Parkinson's disease and conveniently located in Sydney. And we will aim to recruit 50+ patients in their early to mid stages of Parkinson's disease. Now, this is different to what was done previously in New Zealand, in which the patients that were enrolled in the study were enrolled in their mid to late phase stage of Parkinson's disease. And so we're doing this in order to be able to capitalize on the number of brain cells that are still, working, if you like. Thank you. So this is our current timeline. We have established a pig source. We are getting choroplexus tissue supplied, and that will continue throughout the length of the trial. Anti-cell manufacturing will also continue throughout the length of the trial. As I said, we're looking at regulatory approval, which will occur by the end of 2023 so that we can implant our first patient by Q1 2024, and the monitoring will continue. We have, as a company, other research and development opportunity initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, the diabetes cell, we have a royalty on the encapsulation technology, and we've been exploring other value-added opportunities, which we will outline in due course. So the investor milestones are the confirmation of manufacture in a non-GMP facility, for manufacturing to occur in a GMP facility by Q4 2022. We will aim for regulatory approval in for the third clinical trial so that we can implant the first patient in Q1 2024. So overall, what LCT are doing is groundbreaking research in what is a growing global market of Parkinson's disease. And we're doing this with a world-leading, experienced team of researchers, professionals, and collaborators. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you can come and talk to me later at the booth. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Best of luck with the trials as well. I see Peter down the front here going, gosh, 2027, that's a really long way away. But that first trial is first quarter of 2024. So technically it's only a year and a bit away for that first trial as well. Slowly. Sometimes it takes a little while to do the best things. All right, are you ready? I'm looking at my next victim for the stage over here. He's put his glasses on. This is Sensor's CEO, Richard Taylor. Now, Sensor is a minerals targeting company focused on optimizing discovery through the application of AI-enhanced technology and geosciences expertise to big data. Now, I think I should have put a comma in there. That didn't really sound correct, did it? Want to walk me through that one again? You are.
That's all right. We can take it from there.
You want to take it from there? Why
no
not?
problem.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Sensor CEO Richard Taylor to enlighten us to what Sensor is doing.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm taking it from medtech AI to AI applied to the exploration challenge of our lifetime, which is finding where all those battery and critical minerals of the future are going to come from. In our view, they're going to come from Australia, from the data that we've been able to generate. More than $10 billion worth of data that's been put into developing one of the biggest data sets in the world. There's a lot more to be discovered in Australia, but we need to have a new toolbox of way to be able to do that. And Sensor is taking the innovation that's happening in the technology sector and revolutionising what happens in the exploration space. And hopefully I can get the thing to work. It's always when you start talking about technology, you'll click on the button too far. We listed back in February. I think we listed on the day of the Ukraine war started. So it was an auspicious event for us to be listing on the market. And we've been, I guess, riding the volatility that's been happening ever since. We're tightly held. A lot of our directors and founders come from very strong BHP, Rio Tinto research backgrounds. A lot of the management team has a significant portion of the stock. And we have many of our clients have come on board in our share register, including BHP Ventures and DGO Gold, which has now been acquired by Gold Road. Market cap's around 30 million, and we've been trading relatively consistently all through that period of time. As I mentioned before, we're really about the big challenge. It's batteries, it's electric vehicles, 200 kilos of copper in every single electric vehicle that comes out. We do not simply have the supply for this material globally. We're going to have to look at new, more challenging, complex types of deposits, deposits undercover, deeper deposits. The approach that we've taken previously, going out, sampling different areas, looking at the outcrop, this will no longer work. It won't deliver the exponential increase in copper, nickel, lithium that we require for the future. We think that the approach is to go and use areas that have big data, where the governments and visionary companies have been able to collect that information, be able to apply learnings from related sectors to this challenge. Now, what we do is we have a unique business model in terms of the fact that we create a big search space for data where other companies see value in being able to work with us to unlock the potential within their own data systems. So we generate revenue, we're cash flow positive on our technology side. And that's where the partnership with BHP and Ventures and many of the other majors have come from in that regard. But then when we work creating this big data set, we see diamonds in the data, sometimes literally, but usually for gold and precious metals. We'll pick up those targets. We have our own 100% exploration exposure to gold, nickel and copper based on that system. We will improve the data on those projects. We will take equity and royalty and work with third-party companies to develop a portfolio of AI-generated targets, either wholly owned or in joint venture with third parties. So just getting into the technology, and part of AI is pattern recognition. So what a geologist does, we've sort of tried to train the computer to be able to understand what a geologist's thought processes are when they go and look at a deposit. When someone goes to a new area, they have their expertise, their knowledge, their background of all the deposits they've seen, their research papers they've read, that information. So we take 10,000 in the case of gold, different gold deposits of all different styles with all of the different types of data associated with it. And we develop a digital fingerprint for each of those deposit styles. So for example, in geology, we train the computer to be a geologist. We train them to be able to read a report, be able to extract the relevant information, be able to read a geological map, take all of the key points out and convert it into a quantitative data layer. So that for the first time you can run algorithms and pattern recognition on the observations of geologists going back decades. In the past, you have had to read a lifetime of reading of reports that have been filed to be able to do that. We then marry up that information with the geophysics, large continuous data sets, a bit like an MRI over the continent, and combine it with the geology to be able to interpret those areas. And then we suck in vast geochemical data sets to be able to fingerprint what it takes to be a deposit, not only just an interesting occurrence of geology and geophysical information, but what is the grade, the depth, the economic parameters that mean that an area is special. So the computer learns all those relationships, and then we set it loose in what we call our data cube. Now, the data cube is a digital representation, a digital twin, if you like, of the Australian continent, populated by those three main data sources, the geology, geophysics, and geochemistry, but then all the derivatives, all of the approaches associated with it. So there are, within our system, close currently to 2,500 variables associated with every 400 by 400 meter cell across the 40 million data cells that make up the continent. And it's not only just the data in those cells, it's the relationship with each of those layers between each of those cells and their proximity to important features. So proximity to major crustal boundaries, to deep fault structures, proximity to systems that have hosted major mine deposits, etc. And when we've built up this picture, and it's a learning system, as soon as people publish more information, it grows, it learns, it improves its predictions. We know that tomorrow will be better than it is today, and so on and so on. To the point where we will be able to have a pretty good picture without having to collect data, without having to be able to send drill rigs out of the desert, being able to test these announcements and information. We can be able to do it digitally, be able to model and understand the total economic endowment possible in Australia for all the minerals that we choose to seek. So part of the big selling point, part of the work we've been doing in the research is how do you extract sort of very large data sets, like 8.5 million surface samples from the GSWA research departments in government, or 280 million downhole drill samples, and be able to build that into the imaging process. So we've had to develop innovations and software based on machine learning at all of the steps in the process. It's no one algorithm, it's a whole series of innovations across the exploration workflow to get us to the place where we want to be. And then you can do things like look at the elements. Here we're looking at copper, lithium, nickel, and gold potential endowment from geology, geophysics, and surface geochemistry to build up the first maps of the continent underneath cover that people have ever seen in this sort of scale or resolution. It opens up new terrains of exploration, new possibilities for discovery that people have been unable to see in the past. And we're out validating that with drilling as we speak, and both us and the clients with which we work. Part of the exciting things we've pulled together is out in the Nullarbor, 4 major nickel projects that we've been able to recognise on open ground. One in joint venture with Chalice Mining, which people are probably very familiar with. We have the Aurelia project there in the northeast. Very exciting, very large, 1,200 kilometre geophysical feature that our system loves. We're out looking at testing that at the moment. Muir, just to the south of that large Aurelia project. We just put close to a 750 metre hole into that with WA government funding, being able to test the predictions from our system for copper gold mineralisation, and we should have assays back in the next couple of months. But exciting times on nickel and minerals such as that. We also work with a company called Prime Lithium, which is funded out of Germany, a really innovative group looking at lithium processing technologies in Europe to guarantee their future battery supply, given particularly the energy needs of Europe going forward and moving away from gas and other minerals. So we're out developing a pipeline of 8 targets for them. They're paying us $1 million, and we're taking a 30% equity in those lithium projects that have been developed by all that data we pulled together, all of the analogues between deposits. And there's some exciting new lithium potential that we've identified as part of that process, and we're working with them to unlock that value in the coming year. One of the things we've done so far is pull together sort of the biggest geophysical, geochemical data set across the world. We've found that our clients love this. They want to get access to themselves. They want to pay for it. It can shortcut the data identification process on a new project by 6 months. because we've done all the work for everyone up front. So we've worked with a company called CGI. They're a New York Stock Exchange $20 billion specialist in developing technology platforms to allow people to access our data and be able to protect it from use that we don't authorize. So we're making that go live later in the year. A big investment for us in commercializing the data and investment in exploration that we've been undertaking as Sensor since 2019, but for predecessor organisations much longer. So you'll be getting a data platform where companies can log on, can access all the information that they've ever wanted to, upload their information, use our algorithms that automatically integrate that, level it against the geology and geochemistry, clean the information associated with it, just so that they can help target the more than $10 billion that are spent globally annually in greenfield exploration projects. We drill too much, we disturb too much land, we need to do data better and explore and make better discoveries. Just to give you a bit of an idea, oil and gas exploration, it's a different scenario, 20 or 30% success rate from greenfield exploration to discovery. In the hard rock mineral space, less than 1% for industry-wide, best in class is between 3 and 5%. If we can lift the exploration success rate just to 10%, 15% or 20%, we will revolutionise the exploration process and ensure the future of a mining-led economy in Australia for generations forward. I've sort of alluded to a bit of the sustainability angle with Sensor. I mean, we're at about more surgical, more targeted collection of geoscience data. So less drilling to be able to generate better data approaches, less land disturbance, particularly on Indigenous and remote and rural areas. And we're all obviously looking for, and the technology was designed for battery and critical mineral development, which is necessary for the energy transition globally. I'll just touch on our gold assets, which are the 100% owned, or in some cases 60, 70, 80% component. We started this work on gold assets more than 2 years ago. We did so because gold is the most assayed for element of any metal within the exploration space in Australia. It has the best training data set of deposits. And we have some pretty exciting targets within that patch. So we have around 10 prospects that we're developing with funding from companies like DGO Gold and investment from other joint ventures that we tie up with projects in those areas. One of the projects that we're drilling today as we speak is Balagundi. Balagundi is just within 10 k's of the Kalgoorlie Super Pit. It stood out within our system, very similar to some of the big mines in that location, but it's been overlooked. It was a gold mining town in the 1890s. It's had no modern exploration drilling on it, but our target there outlined in dotted ellipse, vertical ellipse there, was the output from the system. We've drilled that. We've picked up significant wide space gold anomalism in our air core and first pass. We're following up on those for deeper targeted drilling on those gold expressions. But in terms of validation of the system, of getting us into the right locations, very strong project. Some of you might be invested in Great Boulder Resources Mulga Bill discovery near Meekatharra, very exciting one by Andrew Patterson. Our system predicted that before it was announced. We were only able to pick up the southern portion of that target. We're drilling that, we've drilled that in the last few weeks and we're waiting for assays. So you can see to the far north there, they've got some pretty stunning gold results and it's shaping up to a very nice resource. We actually like the southern portion just as much and look forward to being able to talk about that more. But that whole Meekatharra area, we think there's a lot more to be discovered and particularly after the next phase of drilling. We've just mobilised the rig. It came from Balagundi to go to Maynards Dam. Maynards Dam is a joint venture with 3 companies in different packages. So we've tied together land tenure from Torque Metals, Yandal Resources and Lefroy, all well-known, very significant, strong mining companies. We recognise this north-south trend was potential from the system. You can see the 2 ellipses there are the targets, one open pit, one underground. and it's targeting that north-south feature. So we didn't actually have any of the historical drilling when we made this prediction. They were in paper records we didn't have access to. But you've got all grade intercepts that have never been followed up, and we're out testing them in the next few weeks, which is pretty exciting for us. Lastly, we throw up some wildcards. Boudinot, middle of not known for a gold region. We were puzzled by the AI telling us to go into that location because it isn't one of the recognised gold districts that you've seen in the last three slides. We went out there, tested, did the survey over the area, picked up widespread gold mineralisation over a very large area. We've got a very experienced board. I mentioned those: Alf Ego, CTO, former head of CRA research; Tom Whiting, found Cannington, ex-VP of exploration for BHP, and a number of others. And finally, we've got an exciting company. This thing can change what exploration's been doing. We've got a great pipeline of projects and some fantastic clients to be working with who are real innovators. So thank you very much for the time, and it was a pleasure. Please see me at my booth.
Thank you, Sarah. So the interesting tell on technology. Now, I like to do a bit of investigating on our presenters when they come up, and if time persists, I like to give you the opportunity to build up some sort of a rapport with them. This fellow's interesting. I really don't have any time, but when I did look up the name Brendan Cummings in Google, came back with you having a number of different careers, possibly, including an Irish sprinter and an...
to be sure.
There you go, and an international hurling champion as well.
I don't mind giving it a crack, no.
Do you play do you play any sports at all, Brendan Cummings?
Yeah, used to play rugby at school, but that's about
Did
it.
you? No.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so no sprinting or hurling. You do
No.
manganese really well.
Yeah,
from what I've heard.
manganese. Yeah, manganese is the game that I'm playing these days.
All right, well, I've got no time to give you a proper introduction now because I've just wasted it all on the sporting career that you don't have. But
That's
I can
all right.
tell of you that this Brendan Cummings is a Pilbara-focused manganese explorer. You listed back in May 21.
Yep.
Just over a year ago now, and they've discovered a significant mineral resource at Flanagan Bore. You had a big spike in April, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. Yep.
Okay, you're going to tell us about that, aren't you?
Half ton. Yeah.
Put your hands together for everyone, please.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks, Christina. So Black Canyon listed 12 months ago, May, raised $5 million, 20-cent IPO. We'll just jump into the slides. I guess just hit the big green button. This is the makeup of Black Canyon. We've got about 51.5 million shares on issue, $4.8 million in the tin, an EV of 8.6. So it's a pretty tight capital structure, and we're well funded. You know, obviously with $4.8 million in the bank, you know, in the next 12 to 18 months, we do need to be quite strategic as to where we place those funds. It's, you know, the market has changed quite dramatically over the last 4 weeks. The shareholder base of Black Canyon, 12% to board and management, including myself. And the top 20 holders own about 37% of the company. So you can see the share price graph. So I said listed at 20 cents. We've been trading in between 20 and 30. We hit a spike of 50 cents upon release of a mineral resource at Flanagan Bore, which is very exciting, and a new discovery in the region. And we're sort of backed off now, but we were very fortunate that we tucked away a cap raise at 33 cents about 6 weeks ago. I'd like to say that we knew that all this was coming and that's why we did it, but sometimes it's just good luck. A bit more about myself. I'm a geologist, been in exploration for the odd 25 years, worked all around Australia and overseas, probably in a lot of places I haven't had a look at over the years. It's quite a technical board as well. We've got 2 geologists, 1 geophysicist and an accountant to keep us out of trouble. Green. I could talk about the photo in the background if this is not working. There we go. Oh, let's go back one. All right, so Black Canyon, look, I think we're primed for growth. When I sort of outlay the 5 pillars of growth for the company, it's manganese focused. That's all we're looking for. We're not looking for any other commodity. It's manganese. And because manganese is essential for the steel industry, which I'll go to in a bit more detail. And it's also a growing, within the EV battery market, you know, manganese is also used in every one of those EV vehicles. We've got a great location in the northeast Pilbara. Having worked over there on and off over the last 20 odd years, the infrastructure that's developed in that region has grown significantly, and we're located between Woody in the northeast and Butcherbird Mine down in the southeast. Mineral resources, we've been growing those since we listed over the last 12 months and managed to define 104 million tonnes at about 10.5% manganese, which is not a bad start. There's also a high-grade portion there of 33 million tonnes at nearly 13% manganese. So that scale, that's really good to look at a starter pit in terms of a mining scenario. But we've still got a lot of upside on all the other tenements. We've got 2,500 square kilometres, so there's still quite a bit of work to do. We do have a pretty clear strategy to develop our assets as well, and it's not rocket science. It's really discover, define, and then look at the economics of those projects. But longer term, we'd like to look at not only producing a manganese concentrate into the iron ore steel industry, but also looking at manganese sulfate as a precursor for a battery cathode. And also an experienced team, which is a key and important. So just a bit of manganese 101. I'm not sure if anyone else has talked about manganese so far at the conference, but it's actually the fourth most traded commodity globally after iron, aluminium, and copper. And it's about a 20 million tonne per annum production rate, which is shipped around the world globally. And that feeds primarily into the steel market. So the steel market is about 2 billion tonnes. Manganese is about 20 million tonnes. So in every tonne of steel, there's roughly 10 kilos of manganese in that steel. It goes up in the rebar, which is mostly related to construction. It's about 15 kilos of manganese in the steel. So that's your bread and butter for, that's where manganese goes to. But what's really developing more recently is manganese into the nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries. People tend to forget about manganese in the cathodes. Everyone talks about the nickel and the cobalt, but manganese sort of gets, it's almost like the forgotten cousin. But nevertheless, when you look at those electric vehicles driving around the place, they've got between 10 to 90 kilos of manganese in those electric vehicles as well. So 10 to 30% of the manganese is actually in the cathode, in the battery. Probably don't need to go too much into the EV market. Everyone knows that it is growing year on. And a lot of the cars that are taking up now and have plans to actually replace combustion engines with electric vehicles. This is the portfolio. We have about 2,500 square kilometres up in the Pilbara, so it's a fairly big part of Western Australia. We're looking for Woody style manganese. Now, Woody's been a mine that's been in operation for 20 to 30 years. It produces a 44% DSO product. The image here on the top right-hand side is a bit of an example of the hydrothermal ore. We're also looking for supergene enriched style manganese mineralisation as well, which is in the ground, that's probably 10 to 15% manganese, but we can upgrade that to 30 to 40% manganese. So Woody, small tonnage, high grade. The Balfour style shale hosted mineralisation, large tonnage, lower grade, but you beneficiate it up. So Black Canyon as 100% has about 1,800 square Ks of that tenure. And we're also in joint venture with Godolphin Resources. We've earned 51% by spending $1.5 million in the first 12 months of our life. And we're looking to earn 75% now by spending another $2.5 million. And we'll probably do that in the next 12 to 18 months, I suspect. You can just see where the projects are located. Pretty much, northeast Pilbara. There's actually some pretty good infrastructure being developed in those regions over the last 10 years, particularly with the influx of iron ore mines in the same region. So Flanagan Bore is really shaping up to be our flagship project. We listed in May last year. I think in the second half of May, I was out there in the Land Cruiser and doing the first bit of prospecting out there. And the good thing with manganese is it's very obvious mineralisation at surface. And when I came across FB3, which is that target there, never been drilled before, plenty of evidence of mineralisation at surface and over a very large footprint. So I was really excited to get in there and drill those holes before Christmas of last year. I was actually on the rig at Christmas time just before Christmas up there. It was about 50 degrees every day for about 3 weeks, but it was such an important drill program to get it done before Christmas so we could get the resource done, we could get metallurgical test work samples and really move towards defining what we had in that area, so well worth it. So overall, 104 million tonnes. It's really showing good grade continuity, good geological continuity, and they're really important factors when you're trying to build a mine. You want to be very certain of where that resource is, and you want it to be very predictable. Within that 104 million tonnes, there is about 33 million tonnes at nearly 13% manganese as well. There's still a bit of upside through there. I mean, I've defined 104 million tonnes. There's this target through here as well. There's another target through there and all these targets. So I've actually got a drill rig out there now, drilling out this limb and down through there on this southern contact as well. Now that's 5 kilometres of strike. So it's a big system. Just ordered a line across there, and we've already drilled some holes up in there. So in terms of manganese endowment, this one tenement is quite large, and it's just one of our 2,500 square K. So over time, we can certainly look at improving. Just drilling down a bit further into the FB3 project. So that's the one with 67 million tonnes at 10.5%. You can just see by the drill intersects, we were quite fortunate, and this is why I was so excited about it when I saw the outcrops. There was just such a high amount of widespread manganese mineralisation, and when we went to drill it, it was totally vindicated. 30 to 40 metre intervals at plus 12, 14%, plus high grade zones up into almost 20% over long intervals. So great deposits showing a lot of scale, and I could easily see a manganese mine being developed on this project just alone. LR1, again, another large-scale deposit, about 4 kilometres away from FB3, again showing very thick intervals of manganese mineralisation and showing good scale, kilometre along strike and 800 metres across strike. So you can see the country. The photo up there sort of shows just shows the manganese, the outcrops running through the middle there, and there's just all this manganese scree sheening off the outcrop there. So we've been moving along in advancing metallurgical test work. You can just see through these 3 core trays. These are just from 3 different areas in the deposit. There's quite a bit of variability in there. So when I talk about SYA test work, that's really experimental test work. So we have an idea in mind as to how this ore might beneficiate and improve. And then we go about and try those and just do the test work. So being able to achieve up to 30% plus manganese would put us nicely into the medium grade manganese concentrate product suite, which is very good for this style of mineralisation. And you can just see with scrubbing and washing, we can go from in the ground 11 to 12% manganese and double that grade. And then using heavy liquid separation or ore sorting, we can look at moving it up to the 30+% manganese. So in terms of marketing the material, we've had some preliminary discussions on where this material might place in the market, and the experts in this area, the specialists, do see it going into the silicone manganese or the ferromanganese product. So going into the steel industry is really the bread and butter, but really the upside is looking at battery precursors, and so we are going to commence leaching studies on the manganese ore as well, and just see if we can produce a battery grade high purity manganese sulfate. So Flanagan Bore, in a nutshell, great locations. We've been growing resources, making discoveries, and commencing our economic assessment. We're looking at putting out a scoping study on that project probably by the end of this quarter, and just engaging with people, key consultants who understand how to get projects into development. Regionally, Flanagan Bore sits within what I call the Balfour Regional Project, and there's a couple of benefits of having quite a lot of tenure in one area. We can look at a hub and spoke tile production model. So you get Flanagan Bore up and running, and then find feeder pits, satellite pits that can feed into that project as well. And Hurricane, if you look at the results we've got in through there, this is at surface, very high grade. It will be a hydrothermal style of mineralisation, so smaller but higher grade. And that's located 15 kilometres away from Flanagan Bore, just over through there. Also got this ground here. There's a historic resource over here at Balfour South, and we've got the strike extents along there. So that'll be good to drill that hopefully later this year. targeting hydrothermal mineralisation up there near Woody. That's the Woody mine right there. That's the 40-year mine life for hydrothermal mineralisation. And already, very good mineralisation. 7 meters at 33%, so right up there in that style of mineralisation, which we will endeavour to get onto later in the year as well. So I guess as a bit of a summary, Black Canyon, we've been listed for just over 12 months now. It's been a fairly busy 12 months, and you can just see what we've delivered, I guess, over that time. Still plenty more work to do. Being a junior, we're always striving to maintain market attention, and all the drilling, exploration, all that information is being used to promote the company. But coming up, I guess we'll look at the completion of the scoping study and also a mineral resource upgrade at Flanagan Bore, and looking at the battery cathode leaching test work as well. And hopefully towards the end of the year, looking at commencing a feasibility study on Flanagan Bore. So hopefully over the course of the last 10, 15 minutes, you've got an idea about, what Black Canyon is all about. And in terms of an investment scenario, we've got a really good capital structure. We're in the right commodity. Manganese is essential for steel, but critical for the battery minerals going forward. Well funded with a clear strategy to discover and develop these assets and look at downstream processing as well. News flow, a lot of work programs coming up over the next 6 months, completion of the scoping study and regional exploration as well. And also delivering the Flanagan Bore project to investors. So I'm at booth 44. If anyone wants to come and have a chat, more than happy to give you a bit more detail on the project.
Well done, Brendan Cummins, not the hurler. Booth 44. Right, are you ready for this next one? This one will be very, very interesting. Island Pharmaceuticals is a mid-clinical stage drug repurposing company. They are focused... What was that hand signal for? Wait, they're having a discussion. Did I duck one? Did I duck one? Wait, let's go back again. I've done that before. I have indeed. But that was brilliant, the way that you leapt up then, ready to jump into the fray. Congratulations. All right, so I really, you know what? I've got the glasses in the case here. Maybe I should just get them and put them on. Right. You're right. All right. Andreas Kroll. Actually, I can't. I'm too far away from them, as our doctor said before. Andreas Kroll, come up here, sir. He's been the CEO of DMEM since 2016. But interestingly, he actually co-founded DMEM as a director of Singapore-based venture capital fund New Asia Investments. That was prior to that, back in 2014. So his vision is to build an international market leader in the fragmented, decentralised water treatment industry. Did you have that dream as a 10-year-old?
Not really as a 10-year-old. I think it started from about 13 or 14. But,
okay. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone? Andreas.
Anyway, so that's that dream. It still keeps me driving and makes me wake up at night at times. Anyways, so what my company DMEM is doing is the easiest way to explain it is by looking at the name. So DMEM stands for decentralized membranes. We are in decentralized water treatment, which means that to our customers we offer decentralized, often containerized water and wastewater treatment plants. And the membranes, that's about the specific technology which is proprietary to our company. We use like a technology which is called hollow fiber membranes out of our manufacturing in Singapore in many of our projects as the key component, a little bit as the Intel inside in our turnkey water treatment plants. This example on the very first slide of our presentation, that's actually a good example to go a bit more into the details. This container, it's parked on the facility of a large corporation in Singapore, sits next to that factory, which employs about 500 people. And it treats the wastewater from that site to legal environmental discharge standards. This customer, actually, this project was the first build on operate contract, which our company has signed about half a year before the listing in 2017. The contract has been existing since 2016, originally with a 2-year term, has been extended multiple times since then. and it shows how sticky lastly our business and our contracts are. We have positioned our company within that framework of providing decentralized solutions and related products. We have positioned our company strongly towards industrial customers. We usually stay away from municipal projects because we find that a more tedious market with tender processes, more competition, lower margins. So we've positioned us towards providing something like a one-stop shop of water treatment solutions to industrial clients. It starts obviously on the left with our equipment, with the membrane-based systems, often deploying our own technology. I'll come back to that in a little bit more detail later on in that presentation as the key component, that Intel inside. It continues with other products which are very complementary, like specialty chemicals, which are almost always required during the ongoing operations of water treatment plants. We have our own blending facility in Perth through our Perth subsidiary for specialty chemicals. That's things like antiscalants, cleaning additives for membrane-based water treatment plants. But also, as we've heard about a lot of mining projects and mining companies in this conference, we have a number of standalone chemical formulations, which are used, for example, in the gold mining and refining process to deal with toxic things like the cyanide and other aspects during mining and refining of minerals. Another division within this one-stop shop of industrial water treatment solutions is our small standardized equipment, pumps and maintenance business. And then in terms of business model, if customers actually like to enter into something that's a bit more formal, we like to combine different aspects, either into like a service contract or a build on operate offering, build on operate contract, under which we not only provide services and sell these consumables to clients, but under which we also rent out the equipment under a long-term 5 or up to 10-year contract. And this obviously gives us the longest term stability in terms of business model. The final comment on this slide, what's important also when coming back to the financials a little bit later on in that presentation, is the 3 segments to the right. They make up about 3/4 of our company's revenues. Overall revenues is about 20 million, close to 20 million. And this was clearly a strong part of our strategy, a clear part of our strategy to develop these recurring revenue segments because they are very sticky revenues, either based on long-term contracts or generating stable recurring orders through the sale of chemicals. The customer base, as our revenues at this stage are coming to a large extent out of Australia, obviously follows the Australian economy a little bit. Strong customer base among the mining sector. We're working with the large mining corporates, but also a lot of the smaller mining companies. We've announced a new service contract, extended service contract with Rio Tinto just this morning. That's a big customer of DMAM up here in Queensland's north at the Emran mine. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've started expanding into the food and beverage and agricultural sectors. Have built a substantial customer base around clients like Costa Group, Coca-Cola, have done multiple projects with customers like that. And then in the overseas locations of our company, which is namely Singapore and Germany, we have a strong customer base among the heavy industrial industry, oil and gas, electronics, diversified customer base, which makes us independent from certain cycles in individual industries. On the next 3 slides, I thought I'd give a few case studies or examples of projects and contracts that our company has in place. This first one here, that's a facility which we have under service contract up here in Queensland. It's a seawater desalination plant. Technology is based on a membrane process, which our company has designed and manufactured. It's taking seawater from the ocean It converts, desalinates that seawater into potable drinking water quality. And it supplies drinking water into a luxury resort on the Hayman Island up here in the Great Barrier Reef. We've built that plant. It's been a $3 million project about a couple of years ago. And since the handover of the plant, we've actually operated and maintained that plant, and we've sold consumables into that site under a long-term service agreement. The next example, that's an industrial wastewater treatment project up in Singapore. A customer here is a company called Givaudan, which is the world's largest supplier manufacturer of food ingredients. That customer has about 70 sites worldwide, and it's not the only project that we've done with these guys, but a good example. It's a wastewater treatment plant that treats through 2 containers in a process with multiple process stages, the wastewater from that site to legal discharge standards. The core of the process is around our own proprietary IP, and that's these white modules, which contain our hollow fiber membrane fibers. Again, that's kind of the intel inside the heart of the treatment process. And this one is a build on operate contract. We actually own the equipment. It's on our balance sheet, and has a lifetime of at least a minimum of 6 years, worth $2 million roughly. And one final example, which is a pretty similar one, the customer here being one of Australia's largest composting businesses. We have built this containerized wastewater treatment plant, which treats the stormwater, the rain runoff and so on from their site in South Australia. Also treats that wastewater to legal EPA approved discharge standards. The core of that system, once again, a DMEM membrane-based process. The membranes here also manufactured out of Singapore. The plant itself integrated and built in Australia in our facility here in the north of Brisbane. And similar economics here, it's about a 2 million contract over 5 years, which actually has just started to generate revenues for our company. Coming to the membranes, just very briefly, the membranes we use, they come in the hollow fiber format. We're basically looking at a porous, microporous structure, similar to a sieve in layman's terms. Water molecules are very small. They are passing through these tiny pores, and contaminants that are bigger than the pores, they are filtered out. The process itself works by size exclusion. We have different formulations that we manufacture, which vary by pore size. The ultrafiltration being like a more standard pore size, which is good to remove things like viruses and bacteria. A pretty unique technology which we offer is a hollow fiber nanofiltration membrane, which comes with tiny little pores at the nanometer range, which is also very unique to our company. And depending on the application, we select the specific membrane, combine it and integrate it with other treatment steps into a process that fits the particular requirements of the customer. Coming to the financials, as mentioned, our company is close to 20 million in revenues, specifically 18.1 million, which we've generated in calendar year 21. We've basically grown from 0 in 2016, listed the company on the ASX in 2017, grown to close to 20 million in calendar year 21. Have strong growth momentum, 12 consecutive quarters of growth in top line cash receipts compared to the prior year period. This growth, as already mentioned, is coming mainly from these recurring revenue segments. So you remember that from the introduction, in particular, the service contracts, the revolving sales of our specialty chemicals formulations. And that's pretty important for the margins also, because those recurring revenue segments that typically come with the highest margins. So this development, besides the top line growth, this has also driven margin growth at the gross margin line from 19% in calendar year 2017 to 34% in calendar year 21. And we expect that this trend will continue a little bit further. We're definitely seeing ourselves on the pathway to sustainable break-even. EBITDA loss in the past year has been around minus 2 million. That reflects mostly the activities around the membrane research and development out of our Singapore facility, which still require a little bit of funding. But obviously, along with the top line growth and the gross margin growth, we see ourselves on track to achieve that important milestone. The start into the new year 2022 was quite positive for us as well. So we basically see these trends continuing. The cash receipts growth on a PCP basis, almost 50% relative to the first quarter 2021. Strong growth momentum continues. The recurring revenue share relative to total revenues continued as well. So we were up and almost at 80% recurring revenues compared to total revenues, are certainly well funded with about 7 million in cash and term deposits as of 31st March. And once again, see ourselves well on track to achieving this important milestone for us, the EBITDA break even. Very brief summary on the final slide of my presentation. So DMEM is a technology company, competitive advantage around our hollow fiber membrane solutions, which bring us into new customer relationships. Our business model is strongly centered around our recurring revenues, which give us a lot of stability, in particular in times like COVID and so on. Strong growth momentum, strong industrial customer base, well diversified, not depending on a single customer. Certainly well positioned within big ESG trends around our recycling wastewater treatment offering. And we're convinced that we're well positioned within a very fragmented market with a lot of small competitors playing in that field. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for your attention.
Is that better? There we go. I was going to pop this one down here. Thank you so much, Andreas, and excuse me for the introduction there. But interesting that your 13-year-old self had that dream, and now it's a multi-million-dollar reality, which is fantastic. Right, this fellow here, met him in the hallway outside, and I asked him a question. I'll introduce what it is he's here to talk about first. The company is Island Pharmaceuticals. Now, they are a mid-clinical stage drug repurposing company. They're focused on the very topical area of antiviral therapeutics for infectious diseases. And their lead asset is something called ISLA 101, correct?
Correct.
So that's a drug that's got a really well-established safety profile. It's being repurposed for the prevention and also the treatment of dengue fever and other mosquito or vector-borne diseases. So this fellow here, Dr. Paul McLemon, who is the executive chairman of Island Pharmaceuticals. When I met him in the corridor, I said, so how do you infect, or how do you get the patients? And the answer was quite insightful. So would you please put your hands together and welcome the good doctor as he explains why this particular company could be a good prescription for our investment portfolio.
Thanks, everybody. So late on an afternoon of this first day of the conference. Hopefully this will be of interest to you. I haven't got a rock. I'm feeling very naked without having a rock on my desk. As has been said, so a snapshot of Ireland. So we're a mid-stage clinical company. What does that actually mean? It means that through a whole heap of access to clinical and other data that we didn't pay to generate, that has been generated over well over a decade and a half, we don't go through all of the earlier stages of drug development. We're moving straight into a phase 2 clinical program to demonstrate the prevention of dengue virus in a human volunteer trial challenge in New York State in the US this calendar year. And I'll tell you the story as to how we got there and why we think that that's a really big step forward for the management of these tropical diseases for which there are no other good options. These are growing diseases. They have historically been seen as tropical diseases. We're focusing on the mosquito-borne viruses in the first instance. That's a whole host of diseases, including the one mentioned, dengue, but also other viruses that have been topical in recent years, like Zika virus, chikungunya, Japanese encephalitis and yellow fever. We have data in all of those disease states. Japanese encephalitis is interesting. JE has not been seen any further south than about here in the Australian continent historically. As recently as only about 4 months back, we had a whole string of deaths from Japanese encephalitis in mid-Victoria and South Australia. So the mosquitoes are being pushed a long way south by global warming. This year's been an extraordinary year, but if JE is reaching right down basically to Melbourne, then some of these other diseases are not going to be far behind them. So there are no good management options right now, and I'm just going to tell you what we're doing to change that. So I've talked about drug repurposing. So we have some intellectual property around our drug, which is obviously important for a drug development company. As importantly for us, we have a whole host of really key relationships that have delivered us that data and history for the drug that's been funded by other people's money, which is a great situation to be in. Part of that was funded by J&J, who originally developed this molecule as an anti-cancer drug. They got tired of putting it through clinical trials at about trial 30 and handed it over to the National Cancer Institutes, who put it through about another 15 cancer trials. Turns out very, very safe drug. Also turns out not very good cancer drug. This drug then turned up in a viral screening program undertaken by Monash University in 2017, and we picked up the global rights to that program, and that's what we're taking into the clinic for these diseases. The other key relationship we have is with the US military. We have a collaborative research and development agreement with the US Army. Why is that important? The US Army is actually quite agitated about dengue and some of these other diseases. In the Pacific Theatre in the Second World War, the US Army lost as many people to dengue as they did to bullets. And they've been fairly interested in this ever since. Unfortunately, in the 70 years since, there's been no steps forward in the control of dengue. So it's still killing as many people as it did then. So I've touched on it already, but you can go and look at this yourself. The spread of these diseases into temperate and subtropical areas is inexorable. It's not going to turn around, and it's going to continue. Dengue is really bad. If you get dengue the first time, you're likely to be hospitalised. If you get dengue the second time with the second strain, there's 4 strains of dengue. That's when you're at risk of actually dying from a syndrome called hemorrhagic fever. Again, there's been no good solution for this disease found, and we hope we have the solution for this. But there's some equally scary diseases in other parts of the world. If you remember the Brazil Olympics, a whole host of female athletes refused to go to those Olympics because of a disease called Zika virus. Zika virus is a horrific disease that's also in the same family. Basically, if a pregnant woman gets infected with Zika, the baby is born without a brain. So it's kind of a no way back disease. What about dengue itself? About half the world is at risk of coming into contact with mosquitoes that can spread dengue virus. The WHO's estimate is that about 3.9 billion people are at risk, and about a tenth of those a year, 290 million, are likely to get infected, most of them subclinical or mildly clinically, but about 10% will be hospitalised. So that's a fairly big number. We've demonstrated in the lab, and I'll come to this in a minute, that we have both therapeutic and prophylactic effects on this virus, and we act on the virus, not the host. And so any data that we've generated on the virus, kind of regardless of what setting that's in, is likely to translate into the clinic. We're not reliant on human factors, if you like, to kill the virus. We're actually acting on a viral protein itself. And then once we have an approval with the FDA, and we're going through the FDA in the first instance, we will then have the ability to move from dengue into some of those other disease states using the same drug. And we're also eligible for a strange thing in the US called a priority review voucher, which I'll touch on if I have time. But in a nutshell, this is a scheme that was put in place by the FDA to encourage new therapeutic options for underserved diseases. They give you a voucher for an expedited review for a second drug when you get the first drug approved if you fall into certain categories. Weirdly and very US typically, these vouchers are freely tradable on the open market. So Big Pharma buys these, it gets them an extra 6 months of sales earlier than they would otherwise get it. And so if they've got their next $5 billion Viagra, it gets them an early 6 months of sales. So that's sort of a sweetener at the back end of our drug development process. This is dengue today, so it's a worldwide issue. This is where we're seeing outbreaks, and you'll see there's been outbreaks relatively recently in Queensland. Interestingly, for our West Australian mine owners, there's about somewhere between 300 and 400 dengue cases in the fly-in, fly-out workers in Western Australia, largely because they live in Bali. But nonetheless, there are dengue cases on a regular basis in the northwest of Australia. If we look at where the WHO thinks that this is going to end up in 2050 as a result of global warming, you can see the spread of this disease has become, quite significant. So you've got all of India affected, you've got a large swath of the southern US affected, you've got all of South America basically except Argentina, the whole of the top end in Australia, and spreading into Europe and the Mediterranean. What are the treatment options for these diseases? With the exception of yellow fever, where there is an effective vaccine, not great. Dengue fever, there is no therapeutic, in other words, no small molecule drug that's effective against it today. There's been quite extensive efforts to develop dengue vaccines. For the reason I alluded to before with the first infection, second infection problem, often dengue vaccines actually have fairly horrific side effects, in that one of the major side effects in some of the dengue vaccine trials was death in the patients. So that wasn't a great outcome, and most of those got suspended. There is one drug that's been approved with a really, really narrow label claim. It's approved in primary school age children with a prior history of dengue infection in a dengue infected area, which basically means primary school age kids in Puerto Rico, which is a pretty narrow label claim. And you'll see the Zika over to the side. That's a Zika baby. So drug repurposing, I've touched on it already. It was originally an anti-cancer drug, turned out not very good anti-cancer drug. Thousands and thousands of patients have been dosed with this drug. It's really safe. We've already taken all of that data before the FDA in what's called a pre-IND meeting, a pre-investigational new drug meeting. They've agreed that that data is sufficient for us to progress straight into phase 2. They've agreed to the structure of our clinical trial, and that's what we're going to be moving forward and acting on in the back half of this year. We've had some manufacturing delays, which those of you who follow us may have picked up on for the first half of this year. Been not great, but we've since solved those, and we put out an announcement about 10 days ago announcing a new supplier for our finished drug, our actual gel caps that are going into the patients. And that's a flag in the sand that now lets us roll out and flag to the markets where the rest of those milestones will fall over the back part of this calendar year and the early part of next, by which time we should be starting to disseminate phase 2 data. So what convinced the FDA that we were phase 2 ready? As I said before, we're not acting on the human, we're acting on the virus. When you're acting on a virus or a bacterium, kind of regardless of the setting, that translates pretty well through the drug development program, because the environment that the bug is in doesn't really affect your ability to kill it very much. So we have a succession of studies that we inherited largely from the National Cancer Institutes that we have a license to. So they conducted some early experiments in virus in a solution in a test tube. We killed that virus and we prevented it replicating. They then moved from there into human cell culture. We killed that virus and we prevented it from replicating. That then moved to the Monash discovery process, where they used a rodent model of dengue, which is a very, very, very severe model, which kills 100% of rats. And we prevented death in 70% of those rats. So on the basis of all of those 4 studies, we presented that to the FDA together with our manufacturing data, and they agreed that we were phase 2 ready. And that's where we're progressing today. And also, I've alluded to before, we've also got cell culture data in these other disease states, which are potential label claim expansions for us down the track. So we've been wrestling to get our manufacturing under control. The manufacturers have to manufacture what for them is a relatively small batch of gel caps, so a couple of 100,000, where they normally do manufacturing runs of about 1 million for things like fish oil. It was difficult to get that date nailed down, and so just recently we've moved to a smaller manufacturer and we have a settled date for that. Once we have those capsules manufactured, they go onto a 30-day stability trial. Once we have that data, we can submit all of that to the FDA for our IND, which then is the study enabling submission to the FDA. 30 days later, if we don't hear, we can start enrolling patients. So that should happen all between now and the back half of the year, which should be a relatively rich news flow and milestone flow process, as you might imagine. This is a study in a nutshell. I won't go into it in great detail. As has been alluded to, it was a kind of a weird study, and it's one I've been involved in drug development for 25, 30 years, and it was a new one on me. So as part of the Army's efforts over the last 70 years to try and develop a vaccine, which they've been unsuccessful with, they developed a very soft dengue virus, what's called an attenuated virus. So it's a weakened strain. They've been dosing people and not treating them with this for decades, just infecting them and then observing their disease. That data is all sitting with in the Army. Under our CRADI, we have access to that data. They ran one of these observational studies as recently as last August. That was 34 volunteers that they dosed and then watched, basically. We have all of that data. The FDA has agreed that we can use that data as the control arm for our clinical study. So we'll be treating only 16 people in a prophylactic study and then using the Army's data for free as the control arm for our study once we put it together and file it with the FDA as a phase 2 study. That's a really efficient way to run a clinical trial. The other benefit in an infectious disease setting in experimentally infecting people rather than waiting to see field disease is that it's a really predictable timeline. So we can take volunteers off the street, screen them for whatever we need to screen them for, experiment or pre-treat them for 3 days and then experimentally infect them. Because of the 24 studies the Army's already done, we know exactly what that disease should look like untreated. We can compare that to our folks who we're going to be treating with our drug. This is going to be a rush. What are the commercial opportunities? Because there's so little good options for treatment and prevention of these diseases right now, there isn't an exactly analogous drug that we can point to. If we look at something else that's similar in terms of geography, level of disease, geographic spread, and the fact that it's spread by mosquitoes, we think that the overall malaria prevention and treatment market is the most analogous to ours, even despite the fact that we're a virus and they're a plasmodium. That's about $1 billion a year market, so that's sort of the market size that we're targeting. Who will those buyers be? It'll be travel centres, travel medicine centres for travellers. The military has a very strong interest, as is evidenced by the crater that we have with the US Army. National outbreaks in places like Brazil, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, elsewhere. Government stockpiles, clearly in places like Brazil and parts of the US, will become the norm for treating dengue outbreaks. Dengue outbreaks are pretty regular in Florida. And we've already mentioned the PRV, which people can come up and ask me about later if they're interested. We've also got some relationships with 2 other universities, one Monash, who we have an existing relationship, but also with Griffith University, looking at screening for new virus and new virus targets using the same strategy. So another drug repurposing strategy. So we'll be looking for drugs that have seen humans before, such that we can jump straight into phase 2. And that's kind of a representative group of viruses that we might be looking at. Upcoming milestones, we've signed our clinical trial agreement with the university that's doing our study. We've engaged a CRO. We've now manufactured drug. We're going to be manufacturing our capsules sometime in the next month or 6 weeks. We'll then put all of that together, submit that to FDA. That will enable the commencement of our clinical trial for enrolment, and then we'll roll into treating people. Board and management, really clear board. One noticeable person on there, Stephen Thomas, is the global principal lead investigator for the Pfizer COVID phase 3 program. He's a heavy hitter in virus development. That's it. Nearly made it.
Brilliant. You need to leave them wanting more. They want to come outside and talk to you and make sure you're not going to drag them off the street for a dengue fever. But it's really interesting, isn't it? And so many implications if this is successful. Right, you two can fight as much as you want, but I actually want the bloke behind you. As good looking as you are my end bit today. We want to know why it is that you are so happy with yourself and why you put that much money into the company. Okay, so we're waiting to have that question answered. But this young fella up here is one of the nice guys of the mining industry. He's also a bloody good karaoke singer. Which could be handy at drinks later today. And I do know this on good authority. This fellow here is called Andrew Muir. He is Caprice Resources Managing Director. Now, Caprice is a high-quality WA-focused explorer. They focus on gold in the Murchison region and base metal. Oh, gosh, I sound like I've started drinking already. That's at 5:30 today near Northampton. Would you please make Andrew very welcome?
Thanks, Chrissy. Yes, so my name's Andrew, here to represent Caprice Resources. standard disclaimer, disclosures, etc. So quick snapshot on Caprice. Why invest? It's quick. So high quality projects. We've got Murchison Gold Project, strategic location, fantastic neighbourhood, highly prospective ground. Northampton base metals, historic high grades, again, significant land position, and we've got some new mineralising concepts on there. Given where our market cap is and our EV, outstanding risk reward, highly leveraged to exploration success. And we've got high impact drilling and news flow in the near term. And of course, management's aligned to success. Board hold approximately 20%. We've got an experienced team. So just a quick corporate snapshot. Our chart there is probably replicated by many juniors at the moment, and I'm sure you're all well and truly aware of the dire state of the market, particularly in junior end of town. We can't control that, obviously. So for us, it's really a matter of adding value smartly and efficiently and using our dollars wisely. One of the other things to point out there is our pretty tight capital structure. We've still got only 82 million shares on issue, considering that we've been listed for roughly 4 years. That's still a pretty good outcome. And as you can see there, we've got an EV of 4.1 million. So risk reward is fantastic. Just a quick snapshot on the board and management. A good combination of corporate, legal skills, boots on ground, lots of grey hair and youthful enthusiasm. Really good board, work well together, and we've got a gun geo and Chris Orshot, who's really the driver of our geological concepts. So just quickly, investment highlights. So we've got 2 main projects. We've got the Murchison Gold Project. The current focus on that is the high-grade Island Gold Project. We've got 7 high-grade prospects on within the island itself, and we've recently discovered Solace anomaly on Lake Austin. We've also got the Cuddingwarra and Big Bell projects. All of those projects have had minimal to no exploration, and we're strategically located because we've got 2 processing plants within 50 k's. And the other project we've got is Northampton, highly prospective base metal play. We've significantly expanded the ground there in recent times. A lot of historic high-grade mining, yet it hasn't really seen much exploration in recent times. Zooming in a bit into the Murchison, tier 1 location, over 15 million ounces has been found in this part of the world. A lot of very large deposits over a very long period of time. As I said, the Island Gold Project, the IGP, that's had historic small scale but high grade mining by the old timers around the turn of last century. As I said, highly strategically located, 2 processing plants, one Tuckabianna with West Gold and Mount Magnet from Aurelius. We're located right next to the Great Northern Highway, so the infrastructure is really good. And we're surrounded on 3 sides by Musgrave minerals. We've got similar geology and similar structures to Musgrave. They've obviously had some fantastic exploration success. Their market cap's about 150 mil, ours is about 6 mil. And like I said, relatively low modern exploration, particularly on the island itself. On Lake Austin that surrounds the island. So zooming in a bit further, here's the Island Gold Project. We acquired this in October 2020 from a privately owned group. They were previously focusing on high-grade, small-scale mining. So most of the exploration that they did was in and around those red dots. So the island itself covers about 25% of our tenure there. We've identified a mineralised corridor of about 4.5 k strike, and the gold's located within banded irons. The other 75% is under what we Lake Austin, which is got lake cover, and hasn't really been touched up until February this year when we did our first pass air core on what we're calling Solace. So I've been pretty active over the last 12 to 18 months. We've, as you can see there from those pictures, RC drilling on the island, we've done about 10,000 metres over the past 12 months. And air core drilling at Solace, we've delineated a really, really interesting large-scale anomaly. So the RC drilling that we did, focusing on the island, we've identified 7 high-grade prospects so far. Initially, we were following up on the historic workings, but we recently expanded that significantly to test the strike length of some of the BIFs there. And as you can see, I'm not going to go through all of those results, but we got some pretty good results from that RC program. And the other thing to point out too is that most of the drilling's been shallow and with a depth of less than 100 metres. So there's a lot more work to do, as we can see multiple high-grade prospects there. The really exciting part, even though we discovered a lot of those high grades on the island, is actually Solace. So this is on the southern fringe of Lake Austin. This is the very first time that we stepped off the island, and we did a large broad-spaced air core program. So this is on the fringes of Lake Austin. So we had to drill through about 10 metres of sedimentary lake cover. Was an outstanding success. We discovered a 1 kilometre long gold anomaly with some quite reasonable grades, particularly for a first pass air core. We were looking at anything sort of north of 0.1 gram per tonne gold, so we could hone in, but we got some very, very good grades and also relatively continuous and contiguous. So as I said, it's an outstanding result. It's never been drilled before at any point in time over the past 100 plus years because it's under lake. It's a very large anomaly. I've said it's over 1K, but it's probably closer to 1.5 Ks and it's still open to the north and south. And it also provides, it's a proof of concept that it's worthwhile testing the lake and continuing testing in the centre of the lake. So early days at Solace, but very, very promising. As you can see, we've done infill drilling. You can see the cross sections there. The gold anomalism is associated with shearing alteration and quartz veining. The average hole depth of the air core only got down to about 30 metres once it hit fresh rock. So we're looking at following this up with an RC program starting within a couple of weeks, and that's going to drill down to about 100 metres. Just a quick snapshot on some of the other projects that we've got. Cutting Warren, Big Bell South. These are still very much prospective and underexplored. We only picked these up last year. I won't go into too much detail because the Island Gold project is still very much the priority, but we're working these up, doing some geophysics and data review, and we'll look to do some more work in due course on that. We've already identified over 33 targets, and we'll look at doing some geophysics and soil sampling once we get heritage clearance in the way, and then eventually get to drilling it. On to our other major project, which is in Northampton. This is a really, really exciting base metals project. High-grade historical workings like the Island Gold project. However, we've got some different mineralising concepts here. If you can see the two areas that are shaded in red, they're our previous tenement holdings that we had up until about halfway through last year. We reassessed the geology and the structures in this area and decided that this area is really, really interesting. It's never really been looked for. There's over 100 high-grade base metal mines mined here between the mid-1800s and the 1970s. As you can see there, it's dominantly lead focused. However, a lot of the mines actually stopped mining when they got to the copper-rich zones. So we think there's a lot of potential to delineate more of these things and also see where the interaction of the structures are that may lead to bigger scale deposits. So as I said, there's over 100 of these things that were mined, and these things stuck out of the ground, so they're pretty easy to find. The old timers obviously stumbled across it. However, the cover increases as you go to the east, so they might be masked. So the key to understanding this style of deposit here is it's akin to narrow vein gold mineralisation, as in they're structurally controlled. So it's a bit different to a lot of other base metal deposits around Australia. So you need to understand the structures and the controls. We did a couple of drill holes in late 2020 and we got some pretty good base metal results, some high-grade lead and some high-grade copper. However, we released at a time when the market was really only interested in gold, so we didn't get a lot of traction in that. However, we'll be looking at going back and drilling that in the second half of this year. So when I was talking about the new mineralising concepts, you can see all the green squiggly lines on there. They're dolerite dikes and a very strong northeast-southwest trend. However, one of the things that we're really, really interested in seeing is the interaction with the structures, those northeast-southwest, with the other structures that you can see there on the dotted line there, which are northwest-southeast. And given that it's structurally controlled, we think that there's a good possibility of the interaction of those two different structural orientations leading to a big blowout in mineralisation. And this concept has never been looked at before. So It's really, really exciting. You can see the different trends in the pictures of the geophysics there. So we're really quite excited in what this could potentially lead to. However, that being said, this is in wheatbelt country, so you need to take time because you need to sign up access agreements. So what we'll be looking at doing is just going through in a methodical manner, identifying the key areas with some more geophysics and then honing in on those and then look to sign up the access agreements. But so it's a bit more of a longer gestation, this project. However, it's got really, really large scale potential, we think. So just to sum up, yeah, we think Caprice, outstanding opportunity. We're exploring on all fronts. Murchison Gold, as I said, strategic location. We've got fantastic neighbours. We've got Musgrave, Evolution, Ramelius, Westgold, highly prospective geology, and we're actively exploring it. Northampton base metals, historical high grades no one's looked at for 50 years. We've also significantly expanded the ground position to over 1,100 square Ks, and we've got some new mineralising concepts that no one's looked at before. So we'll be looking at drilling there in the second half of the year. So as I touched on before, outstanding risk reward with an EV of about $4 million. Any exploration success that we have should see us share price appreciation pretty substantially, obviously market dependent, but the risk reward ratio looks pretty good. As you can see there, we're pretty much at shell value. The other thing that's going to help that is our tight capital structure with just over 80 million shares on issue. So I've got high impact drilling and near-term news flow that should help that along. And as I said before, management very much aligned to success. We hold about 20% of the capital structure, and we've got a very experienced management team with a lot of good experience in this. And that's it. Thank you.
Good on you, Andrew Muir. I told you he's one of the nice guys. He even finishes with 2 minutes to go. Well done. Thank you, sir. So ask him about karaoke later on today. Right, rounding out our first day of the conference, a man who is noted as agile, driven, hands-on. He likes to think he's well-dressed. The type of ED who seeks out time with his team on sites to make sure opportunities to improve are identified quickly. Dan Dorsey, can you take your place on stage, please, sir? Tell us about Austral Resources and perhaps enlighten us as to why you have invested so much recently. Would you make him welcome, please, everyone?
Thanks very much, Chrissy. Well, to answer that, I've been signing off on each one of our presentations by ticker AR1 load up. Well, and as the saying goes, by the dip, I kind of had to practice what I preach. So recently, was buying some shares. All righty. So firstly, thanks very much for, everyone. It's been a long day. And certainly very appreciative of everyone here looking at our opportunity. The usual disclaimer. For those of you who don't know us, Austral Resources is located 120 kilometres northwest of Mount Isa, sitting right up in that really predominant copper and base metals district. What makes Austral different to a lot of the copper players on the ASX? Well, we're a producing copper cathode mine, and we are producing today. Together with our 2,000 square kilometre tenement package, certainly makes us a very unique and sound investment. With $23 million cash at bank as of March, and the fact that we're producing at nearly 1,000 tonne a month come July, August, or to put that into a revenue stream, $14 million a month, we're a self-funding opportunity set to explode. When we listed in November, we didn't need to raise capital for infrastructure. A lot of this, what I'll be doing today, is more about videos showing you what we're all about as opposed to graphs and charts. This infrastructure here, valued at over $160 million. And to put that also into perspective, the lead time on one of these SXEW processing plant is probably 3 to 5 years. This is the Taj Mahal when it comes to processing facility. Here's our crushing and agglomeration circuit. We recently did a refurb on that as Antill's coming online. We're currently crushing I think this morning we did 7,500 tonne. So we're just starting to hit our straps. We have a 150-man camp up on site. And as of this morning, again, 120 staff up there right now. So we're fairly busy at the moment. Austral, so going back to, that sheer size and enormity of that infrastructure, you can see the real value in what we've got there. Key points to Austral. In January, we started a new mining campaign called Anthill. Anthill as a standalone on current copper prices will be about $500 million in revenue over the next 4 years. And we've got a 4-pronged attack on our exploration on our 2,000 square kilometre tenement package. Again, so we are a self-funded exploration opportunity, and our focus is increasing our oxide potential to extend that mine life. Anthill as a snapshot. By way of background, so we listed on the 3rd of November last year, and our entire focus was getting Anthill into full production. Mid-November, we announced that Thiess would be our mining contractor for the next 3 years. In December, we put our first blast through Anthill. January, Thiess started mining, and on Australia Day, we hit the first of our ore body, which was quite patriotic considering we just listed on the ASX. We started hauling ore from ROM to ROM, so from the mine itself back to our processing facility in March. And we plated our first sheet of copper just last week, actually, and come to booth 12. Yeah, booth 12, come out and have a look. You can see, touch 99% pure LME grade copper cathode. It's not a full sheet. It's too heavy. It's 50 kilos, so we cut that one back. So some high-level facts on Anthill. Anthill has 40,000 tonne of LME grade copper cathode. In February, Austral signed a offtake agreement with Glencore, and we also did a $21 million prepayment. And I'll explain why that was so important and exciting for us when we get to our exploration stage. In a snapshot, on today's pricing, Anthill will do about $550 million in revenue over the next 4 years, with a C1 cost of 7,200 AUD. That's going to give us around $250 million free cash flow. And our focus is to really extend that mine life. So we've got a budget over the next 12 months of $10 million that we're going to really punch into the ground. I've got a short video here of the mining campaign. So a lot of people probably haven't seen how copper cathode is actually made. So I'm a visual person. I thought, let's do a video of it. So here's your Anthill mining lease. We've got 2 pits, the east and the west. So here's Thiess currently digging up some ore, loading into the back of a CAT 785 dump truck. Each one of those dump trucks is carting around $20,000 worth of copper cathode. As it heads up to Anthill ROM, we're going to have around 5,000 tonne of ore sitting at both ROMs, just in case we have any mining delays. So we've got plenty of stockpile there. Here we are getting our quad road trains loaded. Before that, I'll start their 44-kilometre haul back to our Mount Kelly processing facility. Now, one of the good things for us there is we've got a bitumen road the whole way. So come wet season, we're certainly de-risked when it comes to that. So each one of these road trains is carrying around $14,000 worth of contained metal. We're doing 40 trips a day. It's what we've just hit now, which is around $500,000 worth of contained metal shifted each day. From here, we'll get loaded into our crushing and agglomeration circuit. And this is the last time we physically handle it because from here, it's all done through our conveyor belt system. So you can see it here getting crushed and agglomerated. Now, what that actually means is it gets crushed up into a smaller size, and then it gets absolutely saturated with a solution. And the whole idea of that is that we're focusing on getting that copper to start leaching out of the ore body or dirt as quickly as possible. So here we've got about 1.2 kilometres of conveyor belt system. And this material then follows all the way along up to our heap leach. I think I said at the start, this heap leach is around 1.6 kilometres in length, and it'll hit our radial stacker. Now, why this is important as well is it puts the ore body exactly where we want it. So our team have got all this measured out. They know exactly where it's going to go and what volume it's going to go to. From there, they'll set up another sprinkler system and it'll start putting that solution, you can see in the ponds there, putting that back up on top. What happens is that it then leaches that copper out of the ore body and runs it back into our settlement ponds. From there, it runs through the Taj Mahal and we start processing it. So here you can see the robotics. Here's a sheet of copper. That's 99% pure LME grade copper cathode. From here, it will then get loaded onto the back of our acid trucks where it gets backloaded back to Townsville. We export out of Townsville. Once it hits Townsville, that product becomes the property of Glencore. Interesting fact. So we will recover 60% of the copper out of that ore within 60 days and 85% within 270 days. Now, why that's important, I mentioned that we've just started crushing and stacking. That's how we ramp up so quickly in a revenue stream by end of July, August. Anthill timeline. Yes, the two main line items I want you to take note of here are the fourth from the bottom and the bottom line. So the fourth line from the bottom, you can see in July, we're ramping up to 800 tonne of copper cathode for the month. By August, we're over 1,100 tonnes. Again, back into a dollar sense, that's $14 million per month or $500,000 per day. And the last line is that gross revenue in accumulation sense. So next year, starting from July, we'll do, depending on, clearly it's based on copper prices, we'll do circa 180 mil worth of revenue for the next 12 months, which is really exciting. Again, it really gives us that opportunity to really focus on our exploration now that we've got that rocking and rolling. Capital structure. AR market cap, I think we're sitting at about 210 million. Our forecast free cash flow, as I've mentioned earlier, over the next 4 years is about 250 million based on today's pricing. You can see here that executive and directors hold a large portion of shares, and we're continuing to increase. So as we're allowed to, I'm certainly very excited to keep buying stock when we're sitting at these levels. Our top 5 or top 10 actually have been really great supporters since day one. And in fact, some of these guys have increased their holding as well. They've really come for the ride with us. So I guess that works us through Anthill. So that's our money. That's what's driving us. That's giving us our cash today. And our real upside and our sizzle moving forward is our exploration. So what I mentioned earlier, we've got a 4-pronged attack in our exploration. Thank you. Firstly is Anthill 2.0. So that's our area that has been relatively unexplored in and around our existing mine, Anthill. Secondly is our key oxide targets. Now, we've got 120 in total, and I'm going to speak to 3 of those shortly. Thirdly, monetizing our very, very large portion of sulfide potential. And fourthly is JVs and acquisitions. And I'll explain our Glencore JV that we did a couple of weeks ago as well and why that's so exciting for us. Again, I mentioned earlier, we've got a $10 million budget for the next 12 months. And our focus is, our goal is to try and hit 25,000 drill meters. So we're going flat out with all our planning up on site currently. Timeline, I'm mindful of our time. This is a busy slide, but I guess what this is telling you is that we're really kicking goals. And the fact is that we're running our 4-pronged attack parallel to each other. And that's why this prepayment from Glencore I mentioned earlier was so exciting. It enabled us to start this now, not have to get cash positive, not have to bank all that cash and then start. We're up it now. Anthill 2.0. So we also had an announcement earlier this week that we've recently got a new exploration manager, Ben Coots. And he's already he's got boots on the ground, and he and his team are full noise. Anthill 2.0. So the blue outlined areas are those 2 pits that you saw in the video, so the east and the west pit. The pink area is the ore body. The key points to really note are to the north, northwest, and the west. So there's structural corridors and mineralizations there, and there's been no exploration done when they did this. Our predecessors did nothing out in that area. And this has the team really excited to focus on that. So that's our first step. Phase 2 is increase. I mentioned earlier that our plant's only running at a 1/3 capacity. So we're really focused on finding some more ore to feed the beast. We've got to get more ore as quickly as possible so we can start cranking that up. And with over 2,000 square kilometres in our tenement package, with 120 target areas, I'm certainly very excited about what we've got moving forward. Some near-term drill targets. McLeod Hill. Now, this ore body, I've seen some results on some of our other guys that have presented. They're not high-grade ore opportunities on what we've got. But the key points for us, it's volume. It's getting feed into that plant and very close to our processing facility and on existing MLs. That's the stuff that really excites us because that's a here and a now that's we can turn into cash. So McLeod Hill's one. Dividend is a lot larger. It's within 2.5 kilometres of our processing facility. Next slide, next mate. Dividend prospect. So here's one here. Here we are on Dividend, the one I was just touching on. So we've got 3,000 metres planned to go drilling in and around Dividend, and we're open in both directions, which has certainly got the exploration team pretty excited. Sulphide focus. I mentioned we've got a very large body of sulphide. So we've got 330,000 tonne of contained or JORC inferred mineral resource. Now, keep in mind, we've had no value attributed to that to date. Our previous owners, whenever they were oxide miners, whenever they hit sulphides, they stopped drilling. So our first initial process is get more drills going and really prove up that resource. And I think we'll find that we'll have a lot bigger body there than at first thought. We've recently entered into a trial with a US-based company called Jetty Resources. We've just taken, just got our samples out on that with those guys. Now they've been able to figure out how to treat sulfides using our existing infrastructure. Now, if we can get this to work, that is an absolute game changer. Firstly, we've got a lot of sulfides. Secondly, all the overburden oxides have been removed. So they're virtually exposed. Our mining costs will be reduced. And I mentioned earlier that our capacity, our plant's only running at a third capacity. So we can certainly be able to increase that. I guess at the end of the day, if that does not work, we'll also then look at the opportunity of raising funds to go down the traditional route in a flotation plant. Lady Colleen. So Lady Colleen's the first of our sulphide target areas. What's got our guys really excited about this, it's open in each direction, but it's also got the ability for us to open pit mine. So we're currently re-optimising based on a higher cutoff grade, and we've had some really high intercepts at over 4%. So this will potentially lose some tonnes to it, but will increase that cutoff. So there's certainly there's a drilling campaign happening there right now. It was originally only drilled at 500 metre intervals. So our first step is to infill drill and then shorten back to a 50 metre step out. So our drilling's already started on that. Flying Horse, I won't touch on that because it's just another great opportunity that our guys are working on how we can monetize some of our sulfides. JVs and acquisitions. I announced 2 weeks ago the next slide, thanks mate. This is a really busy slide, but I'll draw your eye to the yellow area in the centre. So what we've got is 300 square kilometres of our EPMs. The key points to note, any oxides within our existing EPMs remain entirely ours, not Glencore's. Any sulfides found, we'll get 35% of. Glencore are going to put $6.3 million into the ground over the next 4 years, and that's certainly very exciting for us. Key points, just quickly, it's only based on future findings, not existing. So we haven't given away the farm. Don't worry about that. Takeaway, we're producing, we're cash positive. We've got 2,000 square kilometres in some of Australia's best base metals area. And we've got a team that's really focused on extending our resource. Done. Ticker AR1 load up.
Good on you, big fella. Well done. But you were the last to get the extra bit. Team, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, except to say, come outside with us, enjoy some drinks, catch up with the likes of Dan over a more relaxing little tipple. And we are starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in here. So if you can try and be in about 10 to 9, that'd be great. But the cafe, Andy will open the coffee tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So if you want to arrive early, Andy will be serving